Yo, hey, what's up, guys? It's me, N64 again for another video. This video will be a bit different compared to my usual videos, which I like, where I pretty much just talk about Fury Warrior stuff. In this video, I actually want to talk about some tanking stuff. So I thought this is actually a pretty interesting topic to talk about. Mostly my channel and like also all of my gameplay focuses on Fury Warrior stuff, but this time I'm purely focusing on tanking stuff. So that's basically that. I don't want to stretch the intro for too long, but just for some general information. Again, this video will include many things that I came across on by my journey leveling to level 70, and also some heroic stuff. I also tanked some heroics on my warrior, obviously, with some success, with not some success. It is always a bit different, but yeah, that's for that. So I will also talk about all of the different tanking specs in this video. So I will include protection paladins, protection warriors, and feral tanks in this video, and I will try to make this video pretty confining, so this will include lots of information. This will mostly, not really mostly, but this will be still directed to protection warriors, since I am playing one, and that's also where most of my knowledge is in. But obviously I will also mention some general things. So that's that. As you can see, I am actually in Nagrand right now, which is again the best zone in the game. You can fight me with that, but don't mention Grizzly Hills, it's not even close, like, let's be honest. But yeah. All in that, again, if you like these kinds of videos, feel free to like and subscribe. Like YouTube general stuff, I want to like reach 1k subs, would be nice. I also got like semi-partnered, I would say, so I have like super chats and so on available. Again, I'm not really so familiar with YouTube stuff. I'm just doing this just to make some guides and so on, because it's pretty fun to do. So yeah, all in all, let's actually start with the actual topic at hand, which is tanking stuff. So yeah, let's go. Tanking is really interesting in TBC, so I will also separate that between tanking while leveling and tanking at level 70. So that's also one thing I will do. But yeah, tanking is pretty interesting in TBC. There's a pretty drastic shift in general. So in Classic, like let's say you are only really familiar with Classic, you only played Classic, and this is the first time you are in TBC, you will pretty much quickly realize that tanking is completely different than it was in vanilla. Especially when we get some raid content, then it's really apparent. In Classic, the only real tanks that existed was pretty much Fury Prot. Deep Prot wasn't even played, and the other tanking specs didn't even exist unless you want to meme something, like maybe Dwarf Lord or something tanking on a Paladin. But yeah, besides that, there's not really anything in the game that was like a real tank. Especially if you are familiar with later expansions. TBC changed this. In TBC, bosses are and so on and mobs are really dangerous to you. So you need someone who is tanky. That's something you didn't really need to have in vanilla. Basically, you could use some tanking gear, use 2 one-handers, you didn't even use the shield, and you could tank all of the bosses in the game. That's pretty much how it went. TBC, not a thing. This will already start in heroics, where you can't do this, and already not even in heroics, it will even start in dungeons. So yeah, you can throw out the Fury Prot kind of playstyle at around 65-66, because that's where it gets left behind, and you need to be tanky as a tank in this game. But I will talk about this as well in a bit, talking about threat and so on and mitigation. So yeah, now we have actually 3 viable tanking specs, not only one. We have protection paladins, we have protection warriors as always, and we also have feral druids, or bear tanks, whatever you want to call them. I call them feral druids because it's easier to pronounce for me personally. So yeah, that's how it works. All of them are viable. One big misconception you will see all the time is that protection warriors are like really weak and they shouldn't be played, and that's completely wrong. especially in the phase we currently are in. So right now, raids are not even out yet. We just have heroics we can do, that's the endgame content we can do. And that's actually where Protection Warriors are one of the best tanks you can even have. The thing about Protection Warriors, why they get pretty much the short end of a stick, is because they don't really scale well. Especially in later phases, they have to use some really weird kind of offset DPS items to generate enough threat. Where other tanks, for example like Feral Druids, just become insanely strong with gear. And they scale really well. And Protection Paladins always have a space because of their insane AoE threat. Especially in like raids like Hyjal, where if you don't have a Protection Paladin, you can't even do the raid really. So yeah, that's basically how it goes. However, still Protection Paladins are always going to be useful, like they're always going to be viable. Maybe not the best choice, but you can always play a Protection Warrior. Even in the hardest content of the game, even in Sunwell, it is still viable. Don't compare this one, for example, to the Wrath of the Lich King version, where it was completely useless to play a Protection Warrior. Protection Warriors still have some stuff, which other like tank specs just don't have. So yeah, let's compare all of them really quickly, so just to summarize. So first of all, let's start with Feral tanks. Feral tanks are pretty interesting. They start out pretty slow. They kinda work similar to a warrior, however, also not really. So they have stuff like rage, but they can't wear plate, and they also don't use a shield. How Feral Druids pretty much tank is basically they make themselves really tanky. They get lots of HP, lots of stamina gear, lots of armor. They use all of the different odd kind of items to increase their tankiness, their chunkiness, and that's basically how it works. So Feral Druids scale really well with gear, and obviously also things like avoidance is something they really highly want to chase. So that's how they kind of work. So yeah. So that's basically how they work, but however they start pretty slow. That's kind of the problem with Feral Druids. Other than that, now let's talk about some other tanking spec, which is Protection Paladins. Protection Paladins have their own kind of unique identity. They are basically the best AoE tank in the game because of Consecration, which is uncapped and can hit everything. They use mana, they use the shield to block, and how they can generate their threat, like increase their threat, is basically by using spell power items. So Protection Paladins have a really difficult time to actually think about gearing because their threat is really weird compared to a traditional tank you would maybe think of. They increase their threat by using spell power items. I will talk about some of the items later on, but you will see what I mean by that as well. It is kind of strange, but really interesting. This is also pretty much the only version of Protection Paladins that works that way, that are viable. Protection Paladins also got a taunt, so they are perfectly 100% playable in this game, and they are really strong. Trust me, I even saw Protection Paladins tanks in Sunwell, things like Kill Jaden and so on, pretty much the hardest boss in TBC, and it worked, and we cleared it. So yeah, they are insanely good as well, and they scale really good with gear, but the problem they have, there's not a lot of Protection Paladin accustomed gear, because they want to have spell power, they want to have tanking stats, want to have lots of stamina, and obviously also plate. So yeah, that's kind of the problem they have. Now we come to Protection Warriors, obviously the class I'm the most familiar with. Protection Warriors are also pretty traditional. So Protection Warriors are just the really traditional tank. Sword and board, pretty much sword, shield, like a one-handed weapon in this case. And that's basically how they work. However, their defensive capabilities are pretty insane right from the get-go. So the advantages of a Protection Warrior are, I will talk about advantages, disadvantages a bit later. But first of all, let me talk about the identity here. So Protection Warriors, what they have is basically They are just tanky from the get-go because of their basic abilities and so on. They use the shield, they use rage in this case, they don't have mana like a protection paladin, and obviously they just want to have like normal tanking items, nothing like spell power or whatever, but just things like with lots of stamina on it, plate, some defense, some avoidance, stuff like that. So things like where you would say, oh, this is a tanking item, then you are thinking of a protection warrior. That's kind of how they work. So yeah, they're basically pretty simple to gear up, but yeah, that's basically the identity of protection warrior. Now let me talk about the advantages and disadvantages about each class. I kind of talked about it already. So for feral druids, again, their problem is, since they are druids, they don't have access to plate gear, and their kind of gear choices is pretty limited right from the start. That's kind of the problem they have. The AoE threat is also not good at all. Same problem as warriors also have. And that's kind of where it kind of ends. Also, there are like more smaller things as well, but there are things like affected by armor and whatever. But in general, the advantages are pretty insane. They scale really, really well. They become really tanky. The threat becomes really amazing later on as well, especially for some gear. And yeah, like there are things they can get, like there are things in the game already which is pretty much tailor-made for feral druids. Just requires some grinding, which I will get to. Protection paladins, their problem is how they generate mana is kind of weird, but they need to get damage and they need to get healed for them to generate mana because of spiritual attunement. So that's kind of the problem. They don't get a lot of damage. They, that's the issue with protection paladins. Their passive avoidance isn't that strong from their basic abilities, for example, compared to a protection warrior. That's also a problem, so they want to gear up for some avoidance. Gear choices are also pretty kinda difficult, since you need to gear for spell power and also obviously mitigation. And you will get more and more choices with later and later phases, so they're also like a spec which scales well later on. At the start right now, they work best in things like spell cleave groups where they don't need to get hit much. That's basically where they are best, because again, they are not tanky enough to take lots of hits right now. Advantages, however, are they are the best AoE tank by far, by none. Consecration is uncapped. This means it will hit every single mob, and technically a protection paladin can have threat on every single mob, which is pretty insane. Also, obviously, all of their nice other utilities they will bring to the table, since they are paladins, also really nice. But yeah, basically, their AoE threat is unmatched, and that's why they are so good. Later on, if they get enough mitigation gear, they can easily also become really good main tanks as well. But this will take some time, and also the threat is kinda hard to work with to generate threat on protection paladin. So yeah, especially like as off tanks and so on, it will be pretty difficult, since again they don't generate any mana if they don't get damaged and healed. So yeah. Protection warriors. Now we come to protection warriors. This is a class which has really strong basic abilities. Basically the best out of all three tanks, I would say. Things like, for example, shield block, which just gives you straight up 75% avoidance. You can see this right here. So I have this handy weak over here. If I pop my shield block here, you can see I'm actually like minus 27% missing avoidance. So yeah, it is that strong. Basically, if you pop shield block and you have 25% natural avoidance from your gear or talents or whatever, you are basically immune to crushes and crits. It is that insane. So yeah, for 2 hits as well. So this is insanely strong, has a really short cooldown, and shield block is insanely good. Other stuff you also have here is obviously we have the best defensive cooldowns in the game. We have things like Last Stand, which basically means like we get so much HP here. This is like one of our oh shit moments. We can pop this, really nice. This saved many times. Like for example, maybe a healer died or something, or I got lots of damage and I'm really low or whatever. I pop this and I have like a huge chunk of HP again, which is pretty insanely good. This was already really good in classic, obviously as well. Then you have Shield Wall. This again is an insanely broken ability. 75% damage reduction for 10 seconds basically means for 10 seconds you don't get any damage. This is also insanely good. So warriors are the best class if something goes wrong, because you have so many options you can use. Other stuff we also have obviously is things like Thunderclap, which can reduce all of the damage we take as well for a lot, because it will slow attack speed. Then you have obviously also Demo Shout, also really nice ability. But that's kind of where it stops. Our threat generating abilities are not that strong. We have obviously Shield Slam, which scales with like block value, which is pretty nice. We have Revenge, really cheap ability. It costs 2 rage, as you can see. That's kind of nice. We have things like Devastate as well, really cheap ability as well, if we had talented it right. But that's kind of, again, where it stops. We can generate lots of threat here, just with like some basic tanking gear. We need to opt into some DPS gear if we care about some threat. So that's kind of annoying. And also the other problem is all of these abilities, things like Revenge, Shield Slam, and so on, and like Devastate partially, they don't really scale well with gear. So that's kind of an issue we have as a protection warrior. That's also why they're a bit behind later on when the other tanks start to scale. Protection Paladins, for example, they scale really well with spell power. Feral Druids, again, they just scale generally really well. And yeah, Protection Warriors, not so much, sadly. But yeah, that's kind of all of the tanking specs explained. So now let me go over some general points here. Again, I talked about it. I wanted to split this video kind of into what you should do when you are leveling, what you should do when you are level 17. So while you are leveling, basically you can kind of decide. I talked about this when I talked about my dungeon specs for Protection Warriors, but you have options. For example, for Protection Warriors, you can basically also tank as a Fury Prot. Going for more threat gear while you are leveling is something you can 100% definitely do. Would I, however, recommend it? Partially. For the first couple of dungeons, like more of the easier ones, things like Ramparts, Blood Furnace as well, Slave Pens and so on, that's where you can still easily use something like a Fury Prot spec, especially if you have some tanky gear and so on. However, I talked about it as well when, like, in my Journey to Level 70 video. I swapped to the Deep Prot spec pretty early on, and I went for more mitigation. That's also something I would recommend. At around 65, 66 and so on, like for example the Orc-in-Idun dungeons, things like Sapphic Halls, things like, or also like in Mana Tombs I pretty much swapped. That's where you will see mobs are going to hit way harder, and that's where you should think about gearing for more mitigation. That's why I would always recommend, while you are tanking these dungeons, while you are leveling, grab some mitigation pieces that drop. Don't be someone like, oh, I'm not using this one, this has defense and so on it. I go for threat. I always want to go for threat. Then you are going to become a paper tank 100% later on, and people will pretty much start to hate you because you will die really easily. And that's something you should 100% try to avoid. It is not that important to have threat on every single mob, especially while you are leveling dungeons. You should be 100% be really active as a tank, but you should gear for more mitigation. Especially, you should prepare, like your end goal right now is actually to gear up for heroics. And heroics are really difficult, like don't get me wrong, like they're not massively difficult, but from a classic perspective, from a dungeon perspective, they are really difficult. Especially way more difficult than actually the raids that are not out yet. So yeah, you need to prepare for that, so gear for more mitigation. Kind of ignore threat right now, unless you have some really decent pieces which can instead if you have some really good pieces you can fit in, obviously you can use them. But other than that, you should mostly focus on mitigation. While leveling, you can kind of make some decisions. You can still go for some threat gear and so on. That's not really a problem. Normal dungeons are not really going to hit you really hard, obviously. But later on, especially for heroics, you should kind of prepare for that. So yeah, that's kinda some gearing advice I could give you while you are leveling. So let's talk about actually the main kind of thing about this video, which will be the level 70 content, things like heroic gearing, stuff like that, what should you focus on, and so on. So on the right you can see this weak aura here, and one thing you can see is basically my chance to be crit by level 70 mobs and also by level 73 mobs, which would be raid bosses. In dungeons you won't really see level 73 mobs, I think, but you will see things like level 72 mobs, level 71 mobs, so this is still pretty close to that. You can see both of these numbers are green. This basically means I'm crit immune. So I can't be crit by these mobs. This is really important. You should 100% be crit immune. Like, this is really important that you do that, that you focus on that. Don't go into heroics not being crit immune. Mobs are going to hit you for 7k, 6k damage, and if you get crit, you are pretty much fucked. So yeah, definitely this is one of the most important things you need to think about while going into a heroic. Obviously, if you want to do heroics like someone which just is kiting everything, you can do that. But trust me, there will be some points where you have to face tank stuff, and especially obviously like you have to face tank bosses, you can't kite them. So then you have kind of a problem, and if you get unlucky and get crit, you are kind of fucked. So yeah, 100% you need to be crit immune. One thing, however, I see all the time, which is really wrong as well, is that you need to gear up for 490 defense. In my gear set, as you can see, I don't even have 490 defense. And I tanked with this setup in heroics perfectly fine. So what am I doing here? Like, am I doing something wrong here or something wrong? Generally, like maybe, I don't know, should I go for 490 defense? Stuff like that. People will parrot this all the time, that you need to go for 490 defense. But that is just wrong. One thing I don't really like is if people just parrot something and they don't really understand why that is even true. So the reason why we want to do 490 defense, or we want to go for 490 defense, is basically because we want to be crit immune. So if we just have no other resilience gear, which I will get into in a bit, we would need to have 490 defense. But since resilience exists, we can just forego about reaching that much defense and go for some resilience gear instead. Let me explain resilience here. Resilience is easily one of the most important stats you can have in the game, especially early on, because this will help you massively reaching the crit immunity. So what is resilience? Resilience is basically actually a PvP stat. People who played lots of Wrath of the Lich King are probably familiar with this. However, the TBC version is a bit different here. And that's where also a lot of confusion comes from, because resilience doesn't work like a pure PvP stat. So resilience does two things. The first thing that it does is it reduces the chance to be crit by a certain amount depending on how much resilience you have. And the other thing is, if you are going to get crit, it will reduce the damage you're going to take. Obviously the second thing is more relevant for PvP. The first thing, however, we really care about, having that crit reduction. This is not only for PvP, but it's also for PvE. Meaning, if you have enough resilience, or if you get resilience, you will have less chance to get critted, to be crit by mobs and so on. One other nice thing about resilience as well is that it scales, like not really scales, but you need way less resilience to achieve crit immunity than you need to get defense. 490 defense is pretty annoying to get, especially early on. For example, my set isn't like, I'm missing like 10 or so defense, more than 10 defense here. And I have some really good pieces as well from heroic dungeons. So yeah, that is something you can already see, which is pretty annoying. However, I have some resilience gear here, which pretty much helps me getting to that crit immunity. So that's something that is actually pretty important. So I would highly recommend grabbing a weak aura like this, trying your gear pretty much getting your gear on and then seeing, oh, how much am I off of my crit immunities for stuff like that, and then you can swap around some pieces. Because that will give you like way better time, and you can also, obviously, if you have some resilience pieces, you have a pretty nice set you can use, obviously, where you can actually use some better pieces in other slots. A problem with defense gear is some of the pieces which have lots of defense on them are not the greatest to use, because they either lack lots of stamina or some other things which you are obviously caring about. So yeah, that's basically that. Let's go over my gearing. And then I will explain some of the items where you can get them 100%. So, for my helmet, I'm using the Savage Plate helmet. And this is the source of my resilience, basically. If you are level 70, I would highly recommend to check the vendors for some of the PvP items you can actually grab. This is like a PvP set, and especially for protection warriors, these are really useful. Depending on what spec you play, they will look different, but for protection warriors, they look kind of like this. And they are really easy to get. If you dungeon grind it, you have the set pretty much automatically. Since all you need to have is actually you need to only have Honored Reputation with one of the main reputations. Basically how it works is, let me show you what I mean. So if you go to Atlas Loot and we go to PvP here, and then we go to, in this case, Honor at the top, we can see we have some PvP sets here we can look at. And these PvP sets are obviously pretty nice. I think this is a martial set, right? No, this is the wrong one. Sorry, not Honor, it was Reputation. So yeah, this is something that is available right now. I'm not too sure if this should actually be available in Phase 1. I think in 2021 it was available later. But yeah, whatever, we can grab this. And it's really cheap as well. So all you need to do is, for example, this one says requires Thrallmar Honored. Thrallmar is obviously the Horde reputation from Hellfire Peninsula. We as an alliance, we have Honor or Hold. We need to get to Honor too. And if you are honored with one of the reputations, for example, we have like Honor or Hold or Thrallmar for the helmet. We have Lower City for the shoulders. We have Shatar for the chest. We have Inserian Expedition for the hands, and we have for the legs Keepers of Time honored. But this one is like one piece. I will talk about this one later in a bit. All of these pieces, for example, as warriors, they will give you lots of stamina because obviously they are focused on PvP, some strength, some crit, and more importantly, they will give you some resilience. Actually, a lot of it. You can, right when you hit level 70, you can replace some of your gear with some of these pieces here. If you get 2 of them, you get the insanely strong bonus of 35 resilience rating, which is huge. Trust me, if you use that one, you will gain so much crit immunity, it's actually crazy. Yeah, that's just something I would highly recommend. Just if you had hit level 70, you are probably honored with some of these reputations. Shatar's kinda maybe an oddball here. This is also one of the better pieces. I will talk about it in a bit as well. But yeah, then you can easily use 2 of these and you will be like, you will have so much crit immunity already. So yeah, don't think about, oh, these are PvP pieces, I will never use them. Again, you saw it in Classic already. The ranking, for example, items were already really strong for PvP, for PvE, since they give you huge amounts of stamina and obviously some other really useful stats. Same case here, but now we get also some additional mitigation. So this is something I would highly recommend. That's basically what I'm using as a helmet. This is not the best in slot helmet. 100% not. I think the best in slot helmet is actually the 50 badges, the helmet which you can get from 50 badges. But yeah, I just want to show you my like general stuff I'm wearing right now. Then we have Mark of the Raven Guard. This is a pretty nice item because it has 40 stamina on it and 17 defense. Again, definitely not the best neck to use, but pretty easy to get since this is from a quest. You probably already did this quest when you were leveling, and yeah, it's a really nice neck. Stamina is basically your most important stat. one of your most important stats. Like, it is insanely good, and you 100% want to get stacked on stamina. Don't be a tank which goes into an heroic with like below 10k HP. Mobs will hit you with for like 7k, and if you only have like that low amount of HP, like 8-9k, you're already pretty fucked. If you get hit another time, you healers are not going to be fast enough. So you want to have a really high HP pool. Stamina obviously will give you that. So yeah, I'm using this snack. For shoulders, I'm using the Spoilers of Dementia. These are the pre-raid best in slot shoulders. I got them in Cephalic Hall's Heroic. I was running with a group. I was actually DPSing, and we had like a Feral Druid tank. And obviously, Feral Druid tanks can't use plate. So yeah, this just went straight to me. These look really cool. I really like the look of them. And I'm really happy that I also got them because they are really, really good. Strength, agility, stamina, also some defense. They are pretty much perfect. Devil Shark Cape, this drops from Steambolt. You don't even need to do heroic. This is also the pre-raid best in slot cloak because of all of the different stats you are going to get from this cloak, as well as a huge chunk of stamina, which is pretty nice. I have some alternatives here. If you want to have something more threat focused, you can, for example, think about this one, Cloak of Sensita, 15 stamina, 16 hit. I will talk about hit rating in a bit as well regarding threat, but yeah. Again, there are some cloaks you can also get, for example, this one from Hellfire Ramparts, which you can get pretty much in one of your first dungeons you are going to do, which has some really high amount of resilience. 21 resilience, 21 stamina. This is actually a really decent tanking cloak. Especially at that low of a level, since again, resilience is will give you some crit immunity, and this is actually pretty nice, since it will also give you huge amounts of stamina. So yeah, definitely a consideration you can make. Then you have the Breastplate of the Warbringer, also another quest reward. This is really, really nice item. I will probably replace that with one other item pretty soonish. I can already buy it, but I didn't do it yet. So yeah, this is actually a really nice item because it will give you 45 stamina, some insane amounts of defense, and also 30 hit rating, which is, yeah, 2% hit at level 70. So pretty crazy stats, especially for threat, since 2% hit is pretty nice. However, I would highly recommend, instead of going for this one, just grab the Savage Plate one. This one has 3 sockets. We can actually compare them. I think, yeah, we can compare them. This has 1 more stamina, 3 sockets, resilience, and crit. So, and also some strength as well. So it's basically just better, I would say. Obviously, you don't gain any hit here, which is kind of annoying. But still, like, the stats are crazy. You can put 3 sockets into here. I would probably just put stamina gems into here, and yeah, you gain some additional stamina here, which is pretty insane and will be so tanky. I will probably buy this after this video. That's just something I would highly recommend. For wrists, I have Shatari Rod arm guards. Again, this is like another quest reward. Again, most of my items are actually something you can easily get. Like, I don't have crazy items here, but some of them are obviously more rare. These are obviously not the best ones, but they are really easy to get. And they have like really decent stats on them. They also have 1 socket, as you can see. I put the hit rating gem into here. And this will also give me like additional free stamina if I fulfill the socket bonus, which I did. So yeah, pretty nice. Recently I grabbed the Ram Races of Daring, which are basically better. So a bit better than them, which you can get from Hellfire Ramparts Heroic. So yeah, these are just in this case better. So I will probably use these. You can see the comparison here. They have lots more stamina on them, which is obviously the thing we care about. 1 less defense, whatever, but also we get some block value. And block value is really interesting for warriors because it will basically give us more damage on our shield slam, which is obviously also more threat. And we will get less damage if we are going to get attacked as well, if we block something, which is obviously another huge benefit. Gauntlets of the Bolt, these are the pre-raid best in slot option, which you can get from Steambolt. Again, like, pretty good. Like, these are really, really good hands. The set bonus is, yeah, it's not that insane. I mean, All of your short abilities cost 2 less rage is pretty nice, but yeah, it's not that big. However, all of the bold items, they are pretty much made for protection warriors. Protection paladins have another set they can use. I really also love that, you know, like the design of, oh, we have 3 different tanking specs in the game. Let's give them whole like completely different dungeon sets they can use. So yeah, these are really, really well itemized. Strength, agility, lots of stamina, and you have 2 sockets where you can see I put 2 stamina gems into here. So now let me quickly explain stamina. Stamina is insane, obviously, for a tank, and especially stamina gems are crazy good. So that's something I would highly recommend that you should gem for. Basically, you can kind of go through it where you can just put stamina gems into everything, if you want to. Some of the set bonuses are kind of nice, however, as you can see, for example, for this one, which gave me like additional stamina here. But 1 stamina will basically give you 10 health. We as protection warriors also have a nice, really nice talent here, which is vitality, which this one's the wrong spec. Also, I equipped something. There. Vitality here, which will increase your overall stamina by 5%. This basically means for every point of stamina, you will get 10.5 points of health. So yeah, 10.5 health, basically. If you are a Tauren, you will get 11 health. You have like that ratio, which will give you additional stamina. So yeah, Taurens get a bit extra chunky. Meaning, if you use 1 +9 stamina gem, which is insanely cheap on the auction house as well, just to remind you, you will get basically almost 100 health from 1 gem. 1 single gem. So yeah, that's why they are so crazy. And if you are struggling with your HP, gem stamina gems. 100%. You need to do it, it's really good. So yeah, that's why I put 2 stamina gems here. The socket bonus, 3 parry rating, who cares about that? It's not that insane. Stamina gems are just way better. For the girdle, this is another pre-raid best in slot option, also another epic, which I got also in Hellfire Ramparts Heroic. This is also insanely strong. Strength, agility, stamina, 23 defense. Actually, my tanking set is pretty insane, if I'm thinking about it. Not everything, but yeah, some of the items are pretty insane. Including this one. This one I also got for free. I was doing a Ramparts, it was a daily, I think it was really late at night and they needed a tank. It was not really a good run, we had many melees and yeah. But we managed to clear it and that one dropped at the end and yeah, I just got it, I was a tank. That was pretty cool. So insanely good belt, I really love this belt as well, like gives you pretty much everything you want on a protection warrior. Time Worn's leggings. This is insane. This is something you can easily get and you pretty much 100% are going to have this at level 7, not really at level 70 immediately, but Keepers of Time is actually 1 reputation, which is pretty easy to level. So I will get into factions which you should level later on, which you should kind of focus on. But yeah, Keepers of Time is definitely one of them. So Keepers of Time, if you are revered, you can buy these legs, and these are your pre-raid best in slot legs you can get. 100% use them. You would be maybe thinking, oh, these have like really low amount of defense, 18 defense, that's maybe I don't want to use this, but yeah, no, you're wrong. These legs are insanely good. There is not really a reason to not use these legs on either a protection warrior or protection paladin. You can get your crit immunity from somewhere else. Again, you have the Savage Plate pieces you can grab, or you can get some defense from some other pieces. But this is an insanely strong piece. Like 100% you need to get this, and you can see why. The raw amount of stamina you get from this piece is crazy. 57 stamina, 3 sockets, where you can just also gem some stamina gems into. And then also you have some additional mitigation with some defense and dodge rating. Pretty much guaranteed, since you need to level Keepers of Time. There's not really like a huge complicated question or whatever you need to do, you just need to be revered with Keepers of Time. I would recommend you just do some old hill spread. You do like the quest you can do. There's only really one quest that will already give you like huge amounts of reputation already. Then you do a couple of Black Morass runs, maybe for Latros or something, or maybe like for Hourglass. Or you can also do old hill spreads if you want to, but Black Morass I think gives you more rep as well as faster. But yeah, you will have this guaranteed. So buy it 100%. Please, like last time I remember I saw a Protection Paladin tanking Black Morass. And he had below 10k HP and he was not using these legs. Don't forget, it was Black Morass Heroic. So he 100% had access to these legs, but he didn't use them. So I don't know why. I don't think I have to say that we basically wiped and we couldn't finish the run. For boots I'm using Flesh Beast Metal Greaves. These are not the best boots at all. These are also from a quest, especially pretty early on you can get these I think. But yeah, these are still pretty decent. 25 stamina, some defense, some dodge rating. Best in slot would be something you can get from a heroic dungeon, from some epics. I think, however, the best in slots are from, I think they are from Blood Furnace Heroic, which is, For my rings, the first ring is Shapeshifter Signet. This is basically one of the best threat. This is basically the best threat ring you can get, to be honest, as a protection warrior. It is insanely good. Like, it's really good. However, it requires being lower city exalted. The funny thing is, when you are gearing a Fury Warrior, you can also use some items on your protection warrior as well. And this is, for example, one of them. This is also the best ring we can use right now on a Fury Warrior. So yeah, like I can use this on my Fury Warrior set, I can use this on my tanking set. Expertise is basically the best threat stat you can get on a protection warrior. Obviously for like paladins and so on, it's different. They will want to use spell power, but I think I'm pretty sure it's also the same for feral tanks. And obviously expertise is pretty rare, especially good items of expertise. So that is something like where if you have rings and so on, which can give you expertise, are obviously one of the better choices. And 25 agility, pretty nice mitigation already, to 18 stamina, 20 expertise rating. This is perfect for threat. And also some mitigation. So yeah, 100% I would recommend grabbing this ring. Lower city is definitely one of the reputations you should go for. It has like some really nice rewards, and it's not that hard to get to Exalted. If you want to know how I did it, how I got Exalted pretty quickly with Lower City, is basically while I leveled, at the end I basically did like some Shadow Lab runs. I was already like obviously honored, since I did like Sapphire calls a lot to get like to friendly 5909. You know how it works with dungeon grinding. Then I did Lower City, not Lower City, I did Shadow Labs a couple of runs. I didn't even do that many. I think I did like, actually I don't even remember. But Shadow Labs is also pretty fun to do, to be honest. Maybe 5-6 runs or maybe a bit more, I don't know actually. And then I basically did every single Lower City quest that was available when I was level 70. So I can also show you that. I have that pretty nice add-on here. And this one basically shows me all of the quests that are available for one specific faction, and you can see this one is marked. So I pretty much did every single one, as you can see. One funny thing is, when I completed the last one I had available to me, that's when I hit Exalted. So yeah, and you can see you can gain like 8k, 9k honor reputation from just doing these quests. You can also turn in our core feathers, but again they are capped at friendly 5999, so you can't even get honored with these. You can pretty much get honored with these, but then that's it. I think our core feathers are also pretty cheap right now, so if you want to do that, you can probably do that, but you will probably be already friendly maxed out because of like dungeon grinding and so on. But yeah, that's how I hit Exalted. Then I bought the ring, and obviously this is one of the best rings you can get right now. For the other ring, I'm using Protector's Mark of the Redemption. This is another quest item. 22 stamina, 25 defense, and 15 block value. This is not the best ring you can use. I would, to be honest, rather use another ring, which is really nice. which drops from, I think, Mana Tom's Heroic? Heroic? Which is this one. Crystal Band of Valor. Has 22 defense and 16 hit rating, 27 stamina. This is actually a really nice ring. This would be pretty nice to have. So I can kind of round up my, like, some threat gear I have. But yeah, I don't have it. Also, the other rings you can use. I also got this ring, which you get by completing basically the Caverns of Time quest chain, which you probably are going to do anyways for that reputation to get Time Warden leggings. And you can just see this is also another item, but the problem with this item is it doesn't have any stamina on it. It has lots of mitigation, but no stamina. So yeah, that's kind of why I don't really like to use it that much. Other than that, we have other trinkets I can talk about. I have Kiss of the Spider. This is just for some threat. It's obviously pretty nice to use. I also get some hit rating here, crit. But you don't need to have Kiss of the Spider. There are even better trinkets, I would say. And probably using Bloodlust Brooch or something would probably be a better choice. I don't know what this guy's doing. Then we have Adamantine figurine. I got this pretty early on. You can get this in Shadow Labs. This will increase your defense by 32. And also you have that nice effect. Increase your armor by 1280 for 20 seconds. Again, my trinkets are not the best for tanking. The best ones you kind of want to have is actually something else, which you can get from engineering, which are... is it miss? Trinkets. So as these are trinkets you can get. Oh, I got Deceit. Great. Man, this is the second time this happened to me in a video. But yeah. And just to talk about engineering, if you are an engineer, you should 100% try to get one of the tanking trinkets, which I will show you in a bit when my game is finally going to load. But you have some trinkets like, depending on which specialization you do. So you can be a goblin engineer, you can be a gnomish engineer, and depending on which one you have different trinkets you can choose. The goblin one is a better one. I will basically show that in a bit. So we have two trinkets we can use here, and basically we can get the goblin rocket launcher or we can get the gnomish bolt riser. The reason why these trinkets are so good is because they will give you 45 stamina and they are not unique. So you can technically use two of them. But they are also really expensive. As you can see, they require lots of materials. And yeah, also like 6 primal fire, 6 primal earth. This is pretty rough. But if you can get it, it is pretty insane. 45 stamina is huge. And especially the rocket launcher is really useful because it also has an on-use effect. So you can like... It's pretty funny. You can fire like a rocket and you can actually pull with this, and you can see it also does some decent damage, so you will already have some threat on the target, which is pretty nice. The gnomish one in comparison will just turn the target into a chicken, which is, yeah. So definitely I would go for the goblin one. I will try to level my engineering. It is still pretty low. It is like, I think I have 225. I leveled it basically just for Seppas back in Classic. But yeah, this is obviously really useful. You have also some other stuff you can also get if you are fancying it. But yeah, this is really useful, definitely. Yeah, these are like some of the best trinkets you can use. There are some other choices as well in other dungeons and so on. I think I'm not sure if I made the pre-raid best in slot video, but I will probably also do one for Protection Warrior, so maybe stay tuned for that, where I will talk about that in more detail. For throwing weapons, there are many things you can use here. Basically, we are just using it as stat sticks. I'm using this one, which I got from a quest recently in Neverstorm. It has some agility, has some stamina, hit rating, attack power. Throwing weapons in general are just straight out better than the comparison. So you want to get or try to get like a good throwing weapon if you can, because it is such a big quality of life feature. You can pull with throwing weapons way easier. You don't need to have any ammo as well. They are unlimited. It's not like classic where they run out. So that's really useful. That will take up less space in your inventory, and also throwing weapons are way faster. You can throw them way faster than you would do with like a weapon, like a ranged weapon, like a bow or gun. So that's really nice. Well, that's always what I'm kind of looking out for, if I can find any good throwing weapon. But again, this is not the best one you can use. For shields, I'm using Aegis of the Sunbird. This is obviously not the best shield you can use. You can get this one in the Botanica. And yeah, it's a pretty nice shield. Has like lots of stamina on it, some block value, some like defense rating. But yeah, again, like any decent shield will do. You will upgrade your shields throughout while you are leveling, and also obviously doing dungeons. And for my weapon, I'm using Drakefist Hammer. What? Why am I using like a DPS weapon here? On Protection Warrior specifically, you want to have two sets of weapons. You want to have a fast one, and you want to have a slow one like this one, and you also want to have a fast one. This was something I actually got recently, the Truncan of 5 health, which is pretty nice. Yeah. The reason is pretty simple. So slow weapons basically obviously are going to have more damage on them, especially this one, which is pretty crazy. And this is pretty useful for dungeons where you have to attack multiple mobs. In that case, mobs are probably not going to attack you really fast, so you don't have lots of rage to dump. This also basically means you can spam lots of heroic strikes or cleaves. For cleave especially, obviously having like a weapon with just more damage is going to give you more damage. Another thing is being, if you use Whirlwind, which you can do as a Protection Warrior for some threat, like in rare situations especially, it will obviously give you also more damage. So that is something that is pretty important. So definitely this is something I would highly recommend. For these kind of cases you want to have a slow weapon. Fast weapons are really useful for example, bosses which are going to hit you really fast, or mobs that are hitting you really fast. So you can dump lots of rage with like heroic strikes and such. That's where fast weapons come into play. And one of the best ones you can basically get, for example, for that kind of scenario is actually Latros. There are other ones which you can also use, but yeah, you will see most tanking weapons are obviously going to be fast ones, which kind of makes sense. But you don't need to, especially for dungeons, that's really important. If you are going to do lots of dungeons, slower weapons are actually better. So that's just something I would recommend. This is obviously kind of the best slow weapon you can use, because it has like insane proc. That haste is insanely good, and it procs all the time. This is not the upgraded version, obviously, because I'm poor. So yeah, this was already such a pain to get. But yeah, that's kind of how it works. So you want to have actually two sets of weapons, slow one and a fast one. That's kind of how it works. So this is all of my gear I'm currently using. I tanked heroics with this gear pretty decently, and I got also some that's like compliments from my healers, because they were like, yo, finally we got like a real tank. But yeah. Again, like one thing that is really nice about Protection Warriors, they are pretty undervalued, they're kind of underrated, but they're really chunky in this case, because they can take hits. A Protection Paladins can take hits as much as a Protection Warrior. So yeah, they're kind of the Protection Warriors are kind of like Chads in this case. Like they can tank a couple of mobs really well, even if you get hit lots, like really hard, because we have shield block and such. So yeah, that's obviously a really nice thing. Other tanks, not really. Okay. So we have that. Now let's talk about some factions I would recommend which you should grind out, because this also goes into talents and so on. Not talents, but this also goes into obviously gearing up your tank. This is also more of a general thing, so if you go to Atlas Loot and we talk about factions, we have some options here. So definitely one faction I already mentioned was Keepers of Time. Keepers of Time, you should 100% grind to Revered. First of all, obviously, it will give you your glyph, which is your head enchant, which is really important. Obviously, this is something you really want to get. 15 defense, 17 dodge rating. You can always buy this. You don't need to rely on like some annoying stuff. Doing ZG or whatever. You can just use this, and you're pretty much good. Time Warden leggings, I pretty much talked about them. They are pre-raid builds for warriors and also protection paladins. And also, if you're a protection paladin, you can get Continuum Blade, which is a great spell power weapon, which also looks kind of cool as well, which you can easily also pretty much grab. 30 stamina, which is pretty insane. Like, this is pretty much tailor-made for protection paladins, 100%. 30 stamina, 11 intellect, has some spell hit, like 8 spell hit, and 121 spell power. So pretty much the perfect protection paladin weapon. I would highly recommend getting this one, obviously. So this is kind of the thing for protection paladins, protection warriors. So what other kind of factions we have? Similar to that, we also have Shatar. Shatar will give you, at Exalted, will give you a really nice shield, which is pretty good. This one has like lots of nice stats and also 2 blue sockets. We love blue sockets as tanks. Blue sockets are our favorite, like our best friend. Because we can put stamina gems in them and also get the socket bonus. This obviously has like lots of stats and is a really, really nice option for protection warriors, protection paladins to grab. Don't forget, as a protection paladin, you still want to use a mitigation shield because they will have like just way better stats, lots of armor and such. There are shields which also have some spell power on them, but most of them are more focused on casters. Things like shamans and so on. So I wouldn't really recommend going for that. There's like one shield you can kind of grab, but again, you should go for mitigation shields mostly. Even as a protection paladin. However, the other rewards are not that great. Sadly, for example, you have this trinket here. This trinket can be pretty nice as well on a protection paladin for some snap threat, but the spell crit is obviously wasted here. Glyph of Power, you don't really care about that much, but yeah. One thing I also talked about is Lower City. Lower City at Exalted has 2 really nice options for tanks. First of all is Shapeshifter Signet. This is really good for protection warriors and feral tanks, obviously. Like, expertise is insanely strong for both of them. And for protection paladins, we also have something here, which is a Gabble of Unearthed Secrets. This one is another spell power weapon. This one has 24 stamina, some intellect, which is obviously really useful, spell crit, and 159 spell power. And this is actually, disregarding like gladiator weapons, you pre-rate best in slot weapon for protection paladins. There are like 2 options you can make here, but yeah. I would, to be honest, recommend this one. This also looks way cooler than the other one, let's be honest. So yeah. If you are a protection paladin, think about grinding Lower City to Exalted to grab this. This will give you obviously a huge boost to like all of your like threat, and also it has like huge amounts of stamina as well. 24 stamina is really nice. So only problem with this weapon is that it's really slow. 2.7 speed is pretty annoying. So yeah, this could be an issue regarding things like seals and so on. So yeah. However, I would still rather recommend this one than the other one because it has just way more stamina, and that's actually the more important part, in my personal opinion. One other reputation we also have is Honor Hold or Thrallmer, depending on which faction you are. So let me look at the Alliance one, because I'm a filthy Alliance player. At Exalted, again, we have some options we can choose. We have the Blade of the Archmage, which is a really nice tanking weapon as well as for protection paladins. But again, like, this is the other version I mentioned. This one is really fast, but it only has 13 stamina. So it's basically half. Still the same thing, some crit, and we have 159 spell power as well here. So again, really similar. But it also looks, I don't know, it looks a bit worse. It looks a bit like there are many weapons that kind of look like this. I don't know, maybe it would look better with an enchant. I like the mace more. But for protection warriors, we also have a really nice option here, which is Honor's Call. Pretty fast, tanking weapon, 13 stamina, some defense, some hit. Not that insane, but you know, look at this. Look how this looks. I'm actually thinking about grinding Honor Hold to Exalted just for this weapon. Because it looks so cool, you know. I really like the look of it. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe if I have, if I wouldn't have to farm so much gold, I would probably do this. But yeah, really nice weapon, obviously. Yeah, it's not that insane, but obviously an option. Other than that, for feral tanks, definitely Cenarian Expedition is something you need to have to grind to Exalted for Earth Warden. This is one mace you can get. You will see many feral druids with this mace here. This is an insanely strong tanking weapon. You can see all of the stats. Obviously, feral druids really benefit from all of the stats here. They don't really care about the weapon damage or such. But yeah, 500 armor, which is really good for feral tanks. 39 stamina, defense, 24 expertise. 24 expertise, insane. Like, this is just all of the stats you want, and you also gain 712 attack power, obviously, as well. So yeah, this is really nice for feral tanks. And Cenarian Expedition is even, like, it's not something that is going to be that difficult to grind. You have many options to get this to Exalted. There are many quests. You have Steam Vaults. So yeah, definitely a really nice option you need to think about. If you are a feral tank, definitely grab F1. F-Warden. So yeah. Other than that, the other reputations are kind of more of a mixed bag. You will have some options you can grab at lower reputation levels, but these are more the ones you should focus on if you care about getting them, for example, to Exalted. Which one should you focus on? Exalted, since you need to have everyone to Revered, everything to Revered anyway. But yeah, most of these at Revered don't really give you any insanely good tanking options besides Keepers of Time. As you can see right here, for example. This is actually also a pretty decent neck you can grab, to be honest. But the stamina isn't that great. You have some dodge defense is also an option. Actually, I could buy this right now. But yeah. Cenarian Expedition in general is actually a pretty decent reputation. Sorry. This glyph is also pretty nice because it will give you some hit rating, which is pretty good. So you can also think about that. But yeah, that's kind of it for the reputations. Oh yeah, I forgot Thrallmer. It has pretty much the same rewards. You have, however, for the one-handed sword, you have Stormcaller, which, to be honest, looks just way better than the Alliance option. Like, don't get me wrong, but Warbringer just looks way worse. I don't know. This doesn't really look like a tanking weapon. One thing I also forgot to mention is, it is, I would say, pretty important that you also try to get the weapon which also equals your ratio. For example, as humans, we can go for swords or maces. That is pretty nice because we will gain some additional expertise. With this setup, you can see I have 16 expertise, which is quite a lot, to be honest. This is really important. Again, expertise is one of your best threat stats you can gain. And the reason why I have so much is basically, first of all, we have talent, we have Defiance, which will give us 6 expertise. And then we have our Racial, and then I have also Shapeshifter Signet. So all of these combined will give me pretty high amounts of expertise here. So let's say you are an Orc, you should kinda try to use an axe if you can for tanking weapon. You don't need to use an axe which has, like, let's say, tanking stats. Again, like Drakefist Hammer is still one of the best weapons you can use, so you can also use that one on an Orc warrior, but you will gain like less benefits than a human warrior since you don't have that expertise. But still, I would still recommend using Drakefist if you can. If you don't want to use that, There are other options you can use. You can pretty much think about some DPS axes you would use. Like, let's say if you were a Fury Warrior, you can use these as tanking, weapons for dungeons, for slow weapons, and then for fast ones, you also have some other stuff you can use, obviously, as well. But yeah, again, I will talk about more gearing, itemization, and so on in another video, because this video will already be too long. Let's talk about, like, this will be one of my last points I want to make in this video. Let's talk about some talents here, and what kind of decisions you can make, and when you should switch, and so on. So one of my questions I also got asked while I was even playing the game is which spec am I running on, and I get this question a lot. I'm basically running a deep rot spec. So this means just full into the deep rot tree, and then some additional talents like in the Fury tree to gain some threat here and arms for some additional mitigation, and also obviously improve Thunderclap. Early on, you can basically use a Fury Prot spec, which I also showed you in another video, which you can watch if you want to. I have like 2 specs, which I talked about there. And then you can later on go into the Deep Rot spec. But you can also go into the Deep Rot spec immediately at the start. However, you will do less damage, 100%, since you don't have access to sweeping strikes and so on. So that's kind of an issue. The Deep Rot spec is actually pretty insane, thinking about mitigation, obviously. It also has some really good stuff for dungeons. So stuff you wouldn't really pick in raids, or you don't really care about in raids, but they are really good for dungeons. For example, Improved Revenge. This talent procs so many times. And again, in heroics you can still stun the trash. And stuns are really important. If you don't stun certain mobs or so, you can get one shot pretty easily. So definitely something that is going to be always useful, Improved Revenge. Other than that, we also have like an Hodge, Concussion Blow, will stun the target for 5 seconds, is instant. We can also use this. So we have some really nice stuns. This is really useful for dungeons, obviously. Yeah, this is just pretty great. One ability I forgot to talk about for Warriors is also Disarm. Like, my binds are a bit fucked, but it's actually around here. I should change this. It's a bit fucked. But yeah, Disarm is really useful, obviously. Like, you will have mobs in dungeons which can Mortal Strike you. Like, you have these really big warrior kind of type mobs, which, yeah, like with a big two-hander. And if you disarm them, you will definitely gain way less damage. Which is pretty nice also as well. Like, Disarm is a really big ability. Disarm is 100% also something you should use as a Fury Warrior while you're doing heroics, so your tank just doesn't get one shot. So yeah. One talent which in my video I talked about as well, which got picked pretty late on, which was Improved Taunt. I kinda have a different opinion here. I picked Improved Taunt way earlier because this was just so useful for me. I had really high I had a really bad time with threat, especially regarding, obviously I played with Premade, and the 2 other DPS I played with, they were really geared as well, and they obviously knew how to play, so it was always struggling with threat, and Improved Taunt made my life way easier. So I would 100% recommend grabbing this earlier, especially pretty much I recommend you can go all the way through your talent spec here, get kind of everything, and then you can get some important stuff, and one of the things should be Improved Taunt. This is really useful all the time. In dungeons you can kind of taunt everything, you can even taunt bosses, so there are only like a really small percentage of mobs which you can taunt. And again, taunt is just so strong, and basically having 2 seconds, like, you basically have like an 8-second taunt is really useful for everything pretty much in a dungeon. So yeah, definitely something I would highly recommend. But the other stuff is pretty like generic, like a generic Deep Rot spec. One thing that is pretty nice, which you need to get, is Improved Thunderclap. This is really insanely useful. It will obviously increase your damage you will do from your Thunderclap, and like all of the threat, and also the slowing effect is also increased, which is pretty insane. Then you have also deflection, some 5% additional avoidance. One thing that is pretty funny, basically you can reach like avoidance cap if you use shield block and just get like some avoidance talents. Then you're already there, because you only need like 25% more avoidance if you use shield block all the time. But again, this is not something you should really use. Like you should really think about. Like they don't go for some, oh, I'm a tank, I can just use shield block all the time, and then I will just use all of the threat gear I have and just spam shield block all day. That's not really how it works. But that's nice about protection warriors. Since they have like shield block, for example, they have like a way higher avoidance, or they can gear really easily than, let's say, protection paladins, which obviously are going to get hit way more often. They have holy shield, don't get me wrong, but yeah, holy shield is pretty much not the same as shield block, and that's kind of the problem they have. For protection paladins, having passive avoidance is really important. Yeah, by passive avoidance I mean incorporating stuff before you use shield, you use holy shield. So that's kind of what I mean by that. Okay, I think I kind of talked about everything here as well in the talents, but yeah, this is like a basic deep prot spec I'm running. Again, stuff which is really useful for dungeons: improved revenge, concussion blow. You can use this all the time. Like let's say you tank something and you have like another target which is kind of dangerous, you just use a concussion blow, you have your DPS focus on that target, and you are golden. Again, on a like protection warriors, I would say are one of the harder tanks to play, 100%. You can't just use like something like a consecration and you are good, and then you kite the mobs or whatever. Not really possible. You need to use many abilities on a protection warriors, especially regarding threat and so on. You need to be pretty active. You have lots of stuff to do on a protection warrior always. It's a really active playstyle compared to, for example, Fury Prot, like the classic version of Fury Prot, where you basically just kinda spammed Bloodthirst, Revenge, and then Heroic Strike, or like the pre-patch version where we just spam Devastate all day. It is really interesting and pretty fun to play as well. So yeah, you have lots of things to do as well. But yeah, I will go into the rotation in a bit so I can actually show you some stuff. So that's kind of that. Now let me show you how you can actually play a protection warrior, or some of the rotation things you need to care about. So first of all, let me go down this mountain. Actually not mountain, this is like some platform which is in the air, suspended in the air. You can see. But yeah, let me go down here. And I know, slow mount, don't mention it. All of my gold went into my gear, on my Fury gear, which is like, it is crazy expensive. So we have some mobs here, as you can see. So what is something how you can actually start a pull? You have different options, and you should always kind of think about how you should pull before you pull. Just don't be someone just goes in. Again, most of my like information is also regarding heroics, but also like harder endgame dungeons. Depending on your group comp and so on, you can also let other people pull. So for example, if you have a mage, you can obviously let mages pull. Since they can pull with sheep, you have one targeted sheep, and then you can grab the other mobs and you are good. This is something I would also recommend doing in heroics, so you have one less mob you need to care about, and yeah, you can blame the pull on someone else if something goes wrong. Other than that, let me show you one of the rotations you can use to maximize threat, which would be you start out in battle stance, you charge a mob. So let's say this mob would be also like, this wouldn't be a single mob, this would be a mob with like multiple targets. We charge it, we swap to Berserker stance, we use Whirlwind, which will take a bit because I don't have rage. Then I will swap to defensive stance and do my like general stuff. One of the first things you should do is obviously Shield Slam, Revenge. Then you can use Devastate as a filler until Shield Slam is up again. Then you can use Revenge, and you can continue this all day long. Some other abilities, as you can, like for example, as you can fill as well, which if you want to, is stuff like obviously Thunderclap, which is really useful if you have multiple targets. So let's do that as well. Again, like this rotation I used here is one that is also a bit riskier, since if you swap to Berserker stance, you will be more vulnerable and you don't have that much threat. So I wouldn't always recommend that one, but let's say if you are starting out with 0 rage and you want to get lots of rage at the start, not lots of rage, lots of threat at the start, you can use that. If you don't want to do that, you can just start out in protection. So how would that look like? You can pretty much just go to the target, or you can pull it with like a ranged weapon, something like this. So yeah, something like this here, and then we pull it. Again, we are going to attack. Use Shield Slam, use Revenge, use Devastate. No, we wait until we can use Shield Slam again. Yeah, but I get like 0 rage. I get like 0 rage here because these mobs don't do any damage to me. In dungeons, obviously, you will have more rage. And obviously, these mobs are going to hit you harder. But yeah, also Shield Slam critted for 1k, which is really nice. Oh, we have this guy leveling here. So that's kind of how it works. This is like the general rotation. So Shield Slam should be your highest priority, then Revenge. If you don't have Revenge available, how you can kind of work around that is basically you can use Shield Block. So if I pull this and I use Shield Block, obviously, as you can see, I will probably block now, or I dodged. And this will pretty much, then I will pretty much be able to use Revenge, which is pretty nice. So that's kind of how you can also force a Revenge block by using Shield Block. For AoE situations, you can kind of do the same, but you would use Cleave instead of Heroic Strike. How you use Cleave and Heroic Strike on a Protection Warrior is basically if you have too much rage. That's kind of how you can use it. Also, you can also use it if you want to get lots of threat, like let's say you have 4 targets or so. So let me pull more mobs here. I have this mob here. I have this one. So now I have 2 mobs. And now it makes lots of sense to actually use Cleave while also using your GCD abilities. Also, one other thing is you can also use Thunderclap as well in combination. And that's kind of how you do it. But yeah, Cleave is pretty nice. On a Protection Warrior, you need to learn how to tap target. So you need to swap between different mobs. This is really important. Because that's also why I would recommend using something like Plater. If you see one mob which you have less threat on, you need to tap target to that mob and target it with something like a Shield Slam or whatever. So you have to, like, you are prepared already. So you build up threat on mobs which have less threat on. It's kind of difficult to explain. But basically what you want to do is you kind of want to micromanage all of your mobs you are tanking. So all of your mobs are kind of working in a similar way, where you have to think about, I have this mob, I have lots of threat on this mob, obviously, like also threat meter is really useful. One mob on the left, I don't have lots of threat on it. Different Plater, like different add-ons will also show you pretty useful stuff as well. They will show you when you are going to lose threat pretty soon. They will change colors. Then you can swap to that target with tab, or you can just also click if you want to. And then you can attack it. You can also taunt it if you want to. And you can start to build up threat again. Taunt is something you should always use if like a mob is actually running away and if you lost threat on it. That's kind of what I would recommend. But you can also spam it. Like, especially if you have improved taunt, this is something you can 100% do as well. So yeah, that's kind of how it works. Again, Shield Slam. Like for single target it works a bit differently, but for single target would be Shield Slam, Revenge, then you use Devastate, you dump Rage with Heroic Strike if you can. This is especially useful if you take lots or you take really big hits. Then you use, then Shield Slam should be up. Basically you can use Devastate twice before Shield Slam is up. I can also show you that. So let me use the Blood Rage here. So let me attack this, so I have enough. So I've used Shield Slam, I use Revenge, and I can use Devastate kind of twice, and then Shield Slam's up again, and then I can use Revenge again. This is a general rotation you should use for single target. This will pretty much generate the most amount of threat. For AoE, it's a bit different. For AoE, in my personal opinion, there is not really a right rotation you can use. It really depends on which situation you kind of are right now. If you have more than 4 mobs, which obviously like Thunderclap is limited, you can see this right here, this will only affect 4 targets. If you are pulling something and you have many targets, use Demo Shout. This is really useful. This will give you lots of snap threat, and this will kind of ensure that your healer is not going to get threat, because obviously they will gain some threat. This is not the end all by all means, like you won't get so much threat that you can just spam it, and also like maybe a Warlock is spamming Seed, he will still probably take threat from you just by that. So that's something you need to make sure of. But Thunderclap is really useful. It basically does the same like threat, kind of like a shield slam, but up to 4 targets, which is pretty nice, but it's also kind of expensive, but also not really. But yeah, sometimes you are just really low on rage, so it kind of depends. But yeah, using shield slam. So how should you use it in AoE? So what should you do in AoE situations? Is basically you go in, you if you have like also lots of rage, you use things like cleave a lot. You tap target between different mobs and use like shield slam and revenge on them. Especially revenge is like really cheap and will give you lots of threat. It costs 2 rage, which is like insane. Shield slam is a bit more expensive, so that's kind of annoying. But yeah, you can just tap target mobs, use revenge on them, and also you tap target between different mobs for cleave, because again you have up to 2 targets you can hit with cleave, and that's what you will do all the time if you are tanking multiple mobs. So again, I can show you this actually. So let me do like the rotation I would use. For example, if I want to get like lots of starting threat, I would charge in, swap to Berserker stance. So yeah, let's pull more mobs. This is probably not a good idea, but whatever. So now I have these mobs. Now I will kind of tap target here. I will also use like a revenge on this mob. I will switch to a different mob. I use Thunderclap as well. I use now revenge on this mob. I use shield slam on that mob. That's kind of how you want to do it. But yeah, obviously you are not going to be the AoE king like a protection paladin. Also, this is kind of dicey here, but that's kind of how it works. So yeah, now let me actually run away, so I can show you some other stuff. One other thing is, now you would ask, okay, where does the shield block come into play? One thing that is nice is the shield block is actually not on the GCD. So for example, let's for example use like a revenge, which is on the GCD, and you can see this icon here. If I use it, I can immediately still press shield block right after. So this is really useful if you want to use it in macros or something, which is pretty nice. But shield block is obviously something you should kinda be, depending on the situation, you should sparingly use or use all the time. So for boss encounters and such, I would use just shield block all the time, because it will just ensure that you will take less damage. If you have multiple mobs on you, definitely also use shield block, is pretty nice. Also, let me stun this mob here. Then it's also really useful for that situation, definitely. And one thing that is also pretty nice is in heroics, you should always have shield block up. Trash is going to hit you really hard, and it's really important that you have enough mitigation that you don't get one shot. So yeah, try to keep it up all the time in heroics. You never know, like sometime a mob gets loose, sometime you can get really unlucky. Heroics are also really luck dependent. Sometimes you get like Mortal Strike twice in a row and you are just dead and you can't do anything about it because you didn't dodge or something. And sometimes you just dodge everything from the mob and you take like 0 damage. But yeah, that's just something I would recommend in heroics. Just try to keep up heroic shield block all the time, so you have a good time there, which is going to be pretty nice. So that was kind of it for the rotation. Again, tanking rotation, like a protection warrior rotation, is, let's say, pretty complex. There's not really one right one, like complete one you can use every time. It really depends on the situation. Like if you have mobs that are going to hit you really hard, you should have shield block up all the time. You should debuff them with Demo Shout, Thunderclap, stuff like that, so you will take less damage. You should use your stuns, obviously, so you don't really have a rotation, per se, I would say. Obviously, there is a certain rotation which will generate the most amount of threat, which I showed you earlier, where you use Shield Slam, Revenge, Devastate, then you can use Shield Slam again, and you repeat that all the way. But that's not something you can always do, obviously. Sometimes you need to be preparing for some mitigation instead, and then you have like one GCD which you are missing. It's not like a Fury Warrior where you just can't stand behind the boss and DPS all day, and your rotation is really important. Rotations on a tank are really dependent on the situation. Sometimes you need to use the AoE shot, sometimes you need to stun a mob, sometimes you need to like taunt something or whatever. There's so many different situations where you can need to use different abilities. So that's just something I would recommend. However, again, tab targeting different mobs is really important on a warrior since you don't have lots of AoE threat. So you have like threat on every single kind of mob. That's kind of how it works. So yeah, what else can I say here? Again, some add-ons which I would highly recommend are obviously like a threat meter. This is pretty important. This is threat meter classic or something. I will make like a separate video about add-ons and so on, not only about tanks, but like kind of about all of my add-ons. But yeah, these are just some general things. This is like a weak hour, which is pretty useful as well, which I will try to link in the description. Like I got many questions about it, so I will link that one as well. My general UI stuff will probably be in like the add-on video I will make, and that's kind of it, I would say. If you have any other questions, obviously feel free to ask them. If you like this video, feel free to give it a like and subscribe and so on. Again, I'm kind of trying to hit like 1k subs, would be nice. This was a pretty long video, don't get me wrong. This is also not like a proper edited, like big guide, but I just wanted to make a video talking about some tanking stuff, relating to my experiences, doing dungeons, doing heroics, and yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to do, basically. And mostly my message was, which I want to just get out there, is basically you shouldn't care that much about threat. You definitely need to care about mitigation in the phase we are currently in. So yeah, I forgot to talk about it as well when I talked about threat and mitigation, but threat is something you can pretty easily fix inside the dungeon. You can pretty much tell your DPS they need to chill a bit. You can tell them maybe, like, let's say you have a rogue, they should focus more on stuns and so on. Like, let's say you are in heroic. Stuff like that, you can kite mobs and so on. Mitigation is not something you can really fix. For example, you can obviously use stuns, you can incorporate stuff like that for trash mobs and so on. But there's some point where you will need to tank a boss. And then you are kind of limited. You can't stun bosses. You can't really kite bosses. You just need to sit there and tank them. And that is kind of a problem. Obviously some bosses you can kite, but you get my point. So if you don't have enough mitigation there and you get crit because you are not death capped, not really death capped, but crit immune, yeah, then you are kind of cooked. So definitely that's something I would rather just get out there, is try to gear up for mitigation, especially for heroics, and think about threat secondly. Threat should be obviously something you should also care about, but that should be after you have your mitigation stuff already ruled out and you already like have a decent setup. Don't be someone who is joining like an heroic, you are below 9k HP, you have all tank, like all threat items, and you just get one shot from every single mob. Because again, sometimes you don't even want to have threat on every single mob. Sometimes it's better like if a mage or like a hunter also has threat on a mob. So you can chill a bit and you only have to tank like 1 or 2 mobs, and like the mage can like maybe Frost Nova that mob, or they can slow it with Blizzard or something. That's sometimes also pretty important, especially in heroics. So yeah, again, threat should be your second problem. Your first problem should always be that you are tanky enough to be a tank. Don't be a paper tank. That's just something I wanted to say here at the end. So again, that's pretty much it. If you like these kinds of videos, again, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Have a great day. Goodbye.